As the movie begins, we're introduced to an 8-year-old girl named Rose who's talking with an unseen figure in the bushes. She is worried that her older brother, Eric, is leaving for college. So Rose is sharing her feelings with her unseen friend. While she's talking, Eric, who's mowing the lawn and listening to something motivational, glances over at her with curiosity. However, he just thinks that Rose is talking to an imaginary friend and doesn't give it much thought. Eric is a well-liked high school football player who's getting ready to head off to college. To mark the occasion, Eric's parents, Nate and Mary, have invited their next-door neighbors, the Waters family, for a farewell party. When the Waters arrive, Rose runs up to them with excitement and greets their daughter, Jessica. Jessica is also Rose's babysitter and treats her like a little sister. However, it is clear that Jessica and Eric don't have a great relationship with each other. At the party, Nate shares the news that Eric has been awarded an academic and athletic scholarship to attend his dream college in Virginia. Everyone is thrilled about Eric's achievements, except for Rose, who doesn't want to be separated from her brother. So to avoid hearing about it, she leaves the lunch table and heads into the woods. Soon enough, Eric finds his sister and finds her standing next to a tree where they had carved their initials. He then comforts Rose by reassuring her that everything will be okay, because he'll always be there for her, as he is her big brother. Later in the evening, we see Nate and Mary leaving for the night. We then discover that Eric had previously tried to propose to Jessica, but she rejected him. Before leaving for his sports practice, Eric asks her if she'll ever change her mind, but Jessica firmly declines. Eric then departs for his training, while Jessica stays back to look after Rose. A few hours later, after finishing his sports practice, Eric goes out for some drinks with his friends. One of his friends shares that he has a crush on a girl, and Eric advises him to make a move, saying that girls are easy to get and it's just a game. Hearing this, the guy asks him if it's that easy, why Eric hasn't already hooked up with Jessica. Now, this question enrages Eric, and he drives off in a fit of anger. Back at the house, Rose is happily spending time with Jessica, and soon, after the little girl starts feeling sleepy, Jessica gets up to leave the room. But just as she's about to switch off the light, Rose asks her to leave it on so that she can see her friend who lives among the trees. Rose then eagerly tells about her friend, insisting that he is real, even though Eric thinks she is just imagining things. Hearing this, Jessica reassures Rose that she believes her and leaves the light on as she exits the room. The next morning, Nate and Mary return home to find that Rose is missing. Mary immediately wakes Eric up and asks where his sister is, but Eric claims to have no idea. He behaves oddly, showing no concern for his sister's disappearance. Mary then rushes over to Jessica's house and accuses her of being responsible for Rose's disappearance, since she was the last person to be with her daughter. However, Jessica seems very disoriented, and she claims she has no idea where Rose could be. Just then, Eric steps in and tries to calm his mother down, reassuring her that Jessica is not to blame for Rose's disappearance. He takes his mother away from the house and begins his search for Rose. Later, Nate and Mary approach the police and file a missing report for their daughter. After a few hours, the police finally call them and inform them that Rose has been found in the forest. As the family rushes to get her, Eric looks at her in disbelief, and Rose stares back at him with a strange expression. Soon, Rose is admitted to the hospital and put under observation, and later that evening, while Eric sits beside her, Rose suddenly wakes up and says to him, "I see you." She then starts crying and calling for her parents, while Eric looks extremely nervous and frightened. After returning from the hospital, Rose's behavior becomes increasingly strange and suspicious. She walks around the house as if exploring a new place, and Eric senses that something is off about her. The next morning, Mary makes Rose her favorite breakfast of bacon, but she refuses to eat it, which surprises her family. Later that day, while watching a disturbing wildlife video, Mary approaches her with concern and suggests taking her to meet her best friend Anna. However, Rose has no idea who Anna is at first, but then she suddenly corrects herself and expresses her excitement to meet Anna. Afterward, Mary shares her worries with her husband about their daughter's behavior. She points out that Rose no longer likes her favorite breakfast and doesn't seem to remember her best friend. Nate tries to calm her down by explaining that Rose has been through a traumatic experience and her behavior is expected to be affected by it. Meanwhile, Eric overhears their conversation and decides to check on Rose. However, when he looks into her room, Rose strangely twists her neck and scares the crickets out of him. The following morning, Eric is reluctant to join Rose for breakfast, but their mother insists he sit down with them. Throughout the day, he tries to keep himself busy by listening to motivational podcasts and going for runs. However, in the afternoon, he spots Rose from a distance and is horrified to see her eating a worm straight from the mud. Later that night, Eric heads out to the woods in search of answers, but his efforts prove to be futile, and eventually he finds himself back at the spot where he and Rose carved their initials. It is at this point he notices Jessica standing in her window, staring at him with a creepy expression on her face. The next morning, while their parents are out, Eric decides to take matters into his own hands and confronts Rose about her strange behavior. He insists that she eat the bacon in front of him, but the girl refuses his request. Eric then becomes more forceful and begins to question whether she is really his sister. Eventually, Rose reluctantly eats the bacon with an upset expression on her face. But later on, Eric notices that Rose is trying to throw up the bacon she ate earlier. That night, Eric goes to a party with his friends and drinks heavily. While on the dance floor, he starts making out with the girl, but sees Jessica staring at him from a distance. He tries to ignore it and continues dancing, but just then, he sees Rose with a head injury. The sight of this scares Eric, so he quickly leaves the party and drives back to his house. And on the way home, he sees Rose in the back seat of his car. And just then, in a state of panic, he crashes into a concrete barrier. He somehow gets out of the car and demands Rose to come out. But when he looks inside, he realizes that no one is there. Just then, the police arrive at the scene and question Eric about the accident. He tries to lie and claim he was just driving home from work, but the cops notice he's drunk and arrest him for drunk driving and speeding. A while later, Nate arrives at the police station to bail him out. Upon reaching home, his parents scold him for such reckless behavior, and Eric apologizes to them. However, he is still curious about the earlier incident, and after everyone goes to bed, Eric sneaks into Rose's room. He claims that he knows the person is not his sister, and wants to know who she is. Rose then groans in a demonic noise, which terrifies Eric and causes him to flee. The following day, Eric cycles around the neighborhood while listening to motivational podcasts like always. And out of nowhere, he spots Jessica and Rose strangely looking at him from a nearby window. Later that day, Eric and Nate go out to run errands and end up at a cafe for a meal. And a short while later, Jessica and her father show up and Nate invites them to sit with them. At first, Jessica seems normal and goes along with it, but then suddenly, she can't control herself and runs away from the cafe, followed by her father. This odd behavior leaves Nate and Eric confused. At home, Eric gets emotional while looking at happy family photos, particularly one with him and Rose. Just then, Mary approaches him and asks to take care of his sister since they are leaving the town the next day. And apparently, Jessica is upset with them. So Eric agrees and assures his mother that they will be fine. After Mary leaves, Eric uses his binoculars to peek into Jessica's room and realizes that she is prepping to harm herself by cutting her wrists. Without wasting a moment, He rushes to her house and wakes up her parents, but when they check, her parents discover that Jessica has already cut her wrists and immediately rushes her to the hospital. Fortunately, Jessica survives the incident, but her father is confused as to why his typically cheerful daughter would do something so drastic. The following morning, Nate and Mary depart the house after assigning Eric to take care of his sister. And once they are alone, Rose tries to act normal by asking Eric about their meal plans for the day. However, Eric asks her to stop this drama and says that he is well aware that she is not his sister, but rather a foul, supernatural being. Suddenly, Rose's eyes turn black, and she tells him that death is inevitable, and everyone must die eventually. She adds that murder is not natural, and claims that she can sense Eric wanting to kill her. Eric becomes angry and grabs a knife to attack her, but then he notices Jessica standing outside their window. He rushes outside and confronts Jessica, demanding to know why they are tormenting him. In a fit of rage, he pushes Rose to the ground and storms back into the house. Now, Eric takes out the photo album again and looks at pictures of his sister in a panic state. He then takes a shower, and we can see a struggling wound on his chest. After the shower, Eric puts on a motivational podcast and grabs a knife, intending to kill Rose. But the little girl is nowhere to be found. Determined to find her anyhow, Eric enters her room and finds disturbing drawings all over the wall. Feeling distraught, he runs to the nearby bushes and begins to dig in the earth close to the tree trunk where he and Rose had carved their initials. As he digs deeper, Eric uncovers a hand with well-known purple nail polish on the nails. This is the same nail polish that Jessica had painted on Rose's nails a few weeks ago. Suddenly, Rose appears and tells Eric that she saw what he did. However, it becomes clear that this is not actually Rose, but a creature that has disguised itself as her. This creature is the same invisible friend of Rose who had cared for her. As the creature returns to its true form, Eric closes his eyes and asks it to kill him. Surprisingly, the creature doesn't kill him, but instead pierces his nail into Eric's head, causing his eyes to turn black. The story then takes us back to the night of Rose's disappearance. As Rose lies in bed trying to fall asleep, she hears a strange noise outside her room, so she gets up and walks outside to see what's going on. To her horror, she sees her brother Eric trying to sexually assault Jessica, who is not consenting to his advances. Eric is so drunk that he can't even see how wrong his actions are. When Rose screams at him to stop, Eric gets alarmed and tries to justify his behavior to his sister. However, Rose refuses to be convinced by Eric and runs away into the woods while he follows her. She falls and hits her head during the commotion and pleads with Eric to help her while she is still breathing, but he refuses. Eric's mind is confused by the situation, and he wants to get rid of her to protect his reputation and bright future. He decides to let his sister die and buries her under their special tree. As he returns home, Eric chooses to live in denial and cling to his made-up lies instead of confronting the truth of his actions. In the present day, the creature forces Eric to relive all the memories of Rose and the promises he had made her. However, Eric still refuses to admit that he killed his sister. Suddenly, Jessica appears and confronts him about his actions. She screams at him, reminding him how much Rose loved him and how he had betrayed her trust. It turns out that the creature has informed Jessica of Eric's crimes, even though she wasn't present, so she has called the police. In the final scene, we see Jessica attacking Eric with a spade as the police arrive to arrest him. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can watch more videos like this. Thanks for watching.